Cardboard screens, plastic miniatures, weird-shaped dice. For most people, all of this can only mean one thing.
20!
That's a hit!
Yay!
Wow. Dungeons & Dragons has become the iconic tabletop role-playing game. Its most recent form, 5th edition, has inspired hit podcasts, major TV shows, and even a feature film.
Damn it. Only answer when I talk to you, okay? Yes.
That popularity has been bolstered by a massive and massively creative gaming community. Like, there are tabletop games outside of Dungeons & Dragons based on cyberpunk worlds, superhero epics, specific series like Star Wars, or even musicians like Carly Rae Jepsen.
And even within D&D, there's a whole range of creators putting out all kinds of books and shows and all sorts of things that make the game a lot more exciting and engaging to play.
Intellectual property has never been so valuable, and Dungeons & Dragons thrived for decades because it's left its world wide open for fans to use however they saw fit. But recently, D&D's parent company, Wizards of the Coast, which is itself owned by Hasbro, turned many of those same dedicated fans against the company, with a business move that threatened to upend the game's popularity.
This is Next Level, a show about how games are shaping the modern world. I'm Matt.
And I'm Casey, and we're here to talk about the firestorm brewing between a corporation and the fan base they helped create.
So ready to dive in?
Yeah.
Cool. Roll for initiative.
There were those rumors that third-party publishers were being called in to have meetings with Wizards of the Coast and were asked to sign NDAs. So around that time is when I started really watching what was happening.
Linda Codega is a tabletop game journalist for IO9. In late 2022, they started to hear rumblings about changes Wizards of the Coast was making to the licensing of their game Dungeons & Dragons.
Copyright licensing tends to be a fraught process, something that involves a lot of time, money, and legal teams to work with someone else's intellectual property.
But back in 2000, Wizards established something called the Open Gaming License, which allowed anyone to use certain parts of Dungeons & Dragons in their own product. Although specific monsters or characters were still protected, the generic rules about how they worked in-game were up for grabs.
Giving that much creative license over your game to the public was a pretty big deal, especially when most modern entertainment companies like Disney and Warner Brothers are so protective over their intellectual property. The Open Gaming License, or OGL, has been a cornerstone of the past 2 decades of tabletop games, not just Dungeons & Dragons. So rumors that it might be up for revision sparked a lot of concern.
It wasn't publicly clear how extensive these changes would be, until Codega obtained and published a leaked draft of the new license.
As I was reading that document, my eyes just kind of got bigger and bigger as I was like, what? There's no way this is fully thought out. There's no way that this is really what they want to do.
According to that draft, Wizards plan to alter future use of the OGL, restricting creators to a more limited license going forward. Among other things, the new license could have let Wizards take ownership of certain content published under the OGL, and demand royalty payments on creator revenue that exceeded $750,000.
Wizards said the rework of its license would help clamp down on objectionable uses of their content and prevent their biggest competitors from exploiting D&D's popularity. But the changes might also have boxed out smaller publishers who worked and grew under the assurances of the open license.
There's a lot of debate about why they actually did it, but I think that the easiest answer is it's about controlling their IP.
Unsurprisingly, the perspective changes sparked a lot of outrage. Even people who've never published anything before were up in arms.
And that's because this wasn't just a business decision. It was messing with the carefully constructed community around D&D.
And for D&D specifically, letting the community chip in makes the game so much bigger and better. Case in point, check this out.
We were just fiddling around and we started making magic items, and I had these sketches sitting on my desk for months. And I did a few of them and I put them out together on Reddit. And from there, I kind of became really fueled by the passion that I felt, in the greater community.
Griffin McCauley runs the Griffin Saddlebag, a collection of newly crafted Dungeons & Dragons magic items. His work supplements the basic items Wizards created with hundreds of new creations for players to use in their own games.
Can I have a septum ring of the Great Minotaur?
Absolutely not.
The stuff in this book is usable in D&D games thanks to the OGL. The items can reference specific rules like armor class and dexterity saves without running afoul of Wizards' copyright. And Macaulay still retains the right to his own unique creations and trademarks, like the saddlebag itself.
This is just one example of a large third-party ecosystem, separate from Wizards, that puts out content for D&D. Everything from books to podcasts to accessories, the OGL helps give many of these creators a sense of security about what parts of D&D they're free to use.
Wizards itself doesn't see any direct money from these creations, but they do help drive new players to their game.
Thank you to all of you for getting me into Critical Role, into playing Dungeons & Dragons. This is my party, actually.
Woo! And expand D&D's scope beyond what Wizards can publish alone. Trying to support that ecosystem while making a profit off their game is a difficult balance to strike. And for many creators, the OGL changes crossed the line.
And hey, I don't think anybody in their right mind is going to fault Wizards for trying to make money. I mean, they've been doing a great job of it, but it's when they change the nature of the deal and it becomes abusive, that's the problem.
Macaulay was one of the many creators sounding the alarm publicly about the changes. By emphasizing how the OGL affects their work, D&D creators of all stripes were able to rally their fans against the changes.
The backlash ended up severe enough to force Wizards' hand. They promised not to mess with the OGL and to move parts of the current game onto a Creative Commons license. Whatever happens with D&D going forward, those parts will always be openly accessible. While announcing those changes, D&D executive producer Kyle Brink said, quote, "We wanted to protect the D&D play experience into the future. We still want to do that with your help. We're grateful that this community is passionate and active because we'll need your help protecting the game's inclusive and welcoming nature." Wizards and Hasbro did not respond to a request for comment for this story.
Wizards' reversal is mending fences with D&D players, but it's also given those players a better understanding of how the community works.
In almost all cases, players have leapt to the support of creators. The players are, in general, considerably more aware of how the whole system works and has worked and how it has benefited them as players as well as just the health of the game.
So Wizards probably won't be messing with the OGL again anytime soon, but the factors that led them to try haven't gone away.
The tabletop industry has changed a lot in recent years, and Wizards probably feels pressured to keep up with the competition, especially when it comes to the digital side of things. So this is Foundry VTT, a tabletop simulator that allows users to run a slew of different games, including Dungeons & Dragons, over the internet. Foundry creator Andrew Clayton started working on the system as a hobby in 2018. The service was released publicly in May 2020, right as the COVID-19 pandemic was hitting the world.
When you have millions of people who are used to playing in their home games that now have to cancel those plans and start looking for other alternatives, it sucks to talk about it that way, but for the tabletop industry, it was a real thing, especially for people who are doing digital.
Foundry doesn't have a formal agreement with Wizards, but it does still support digital D&D thanks to the auspices of the OGL. But the thing about Foundry is it's not just a D&D platform. The company has over 50 partnerships with different publishers, each of whom has their own games.
It's something that has just become hugely relied upon throughout the industry, and in many cases relied upon for use cases that perhaps it wasn't needed for.
With the OGL under threat, several game publishers have started to forge a separate path, announcing new games with separate licensing systems.
Having made DLC for this game for years, we feel like now is the right time to show you what we can do if we're not shackled to this 50-year-old game.
Several of those competitors have also reported record sales during the controversy.
As counterintuitive as it seems, Wizards' support for the OGL helps bolster D&D even when boosting the competition. The OGL ensures D&D stays at the center of the tabletop industry, and removing it could ultimately weaken D&D's popularity in the long run.
Accessibility of the game system is what is responsible for D&D being in the position that it is today. The danger of having a walled garden where D&D only exists on, the D&D website is such that it might close off the extent to which it is as ubiquitous as it is today.
20 damage!
That kills it.
Hey! Hooray!
Good job. So for now, it's pretty clear that the effects of the OGL controversy are going to reverberate around the tabletop community for a while. Wizards is still working to rebuild trust with its fans, as well as with the publishers and third parties that it relies on for extra content.
It's a really good example of how community and fan labor can play into major entertainment properties. Because while not all franchises have quite the same relationship with fans as D&D does, they all do rely on their fan base to survive.
Exactly. D&D's community and culture are a key part of why the game has been so successful. But that kind of support can't be taken lightly. After all, a D&D game is only as good as its players.
This is what people think Dungeons & Dragons is.